Project Jupiter's a better kind of data center, using clean fuel cell technology to protect our air and water without impacting energy costs. Investing $50 million in the local water system? It's a data center done right.
Paid for by Oracle.
Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast about the politics, policies, and personalities of the Land of Enchantment. I'm your host, Clara Bates, one of the Santa Fe New Mexicans politics reporters, filling in for my colleague Daniel Chacon this week. I am delighted to introduce our guest for this week, Representative Marianna Anaya, who is an Albuquerque Democrat who served in the legislature since 2025. Representative Anaya was also a community organizer and a lobbyist, and she's one of 4 members of the House Investigatory Committee, known as the Truth Commission, which is investigating Jeffrey Epstein's activities and potential crimes in the state. Representative, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Clara, for having me. Thanks for asking me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the legislature?
Sure. Well, before I was a legislator, I was a community organizer. And really, this started during my undergrad. I was organizing for reproductive justice in Texas, of all places. I went to UT Austin, so we were within walking distance of the Capitol. And I was organizing the summer I call the Wendy Davis summer, which was her famous filibuster to help further reproductive justice in Texas. I went off to grad school at UCLA, but I came home and I thought, what am I supposed to do with this degree? Like, I had a degree in Mexican American Studies and Education Policy. And I was like, I'm just going to barista for a while. And a friend of mine actually asked me to run a campaign. And I was like, no, that sounds awful. Like, that sounds really awful. And she was like, well, you're a community organizer. Well, this friend of mine just so happened to be our now current state representative, Diane Torres Velasquez. And her brother-in-law was running. So I ran Bob Coffey's campaign for anybody who remembers that year. That was actually the year we lost the House. So it was a bad year for Democrats, but I guess it was a great year to start stepping in. So because I was a community organizer, they kind of trusted me with this campaign. And when the campaign was done, I thought, oh, there's no way I'm doing this again. That's crazy. This is the worst. And it was actually at the prompting of some of our current state legislators, namely Liz Thompson, Chair Thompson, who said, hey, you should really join Emerge. And that was the start of, I think, my journey here. I entered Emerge New Mexico and soon just started becoming a board member. Then I was the chair of the run committee and I was the president at some point, and just really helping this organization along and honestly helping many of the women, if not most of the women who are currently serving in our legislature, get elected. So a lot of my colleagues, it's been very cool because I knew them before they were in office. I remember helping so many of them with their stump speeches and trying again and restarting and knocking doors for them. And at that time, I was also an organizer for the teachers union. So that is how my tentacles started reaching into this political space. But because I'd always been an organizer, an activist, I feel like those are the values that I carry with me today. So as I became a lobbyist, I was advocating for reproductive rights with Planned Parenthood, Equality New Mexico. I worked with the Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. And I guess that's the long story long of how I got here.
Yeah, I read you say it was kind of a crowded primary when you ran and that some people criticized you for being a lobbyist. I think you called it the L word. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I'm so glad you listened to that interview. That was one of my favorites, actually, of the campaign. And honestly, I feel like you need a sense of humor in order to survive in this political world. But I think it was Nash that I interviewed with, and I was telling them that, the L word I'm usually talking about is being a lesbian. And I was like, it's very weird for me that people are trying to attack me being a lobbyist. And so I joked about it, but I'm also really proud of all of that work that I did. Like, by the time I got to office, I knew how to pass a bill. I knew who to talk to. And I think a lot of times being a lobbyist gets a bad rap, right? Because for the most part, like you have a bunch of lobbyists who are corporate lobbyists. And, if you walk into the Roundhouse, you don't have as many advocates. And those are really for the people, right? They're organizations who are for the people. They are some of our 501(c)(3)s or nonprofits doing like on the ground work with everyday people, with working people, with unions. And so for me, I actually walked into the race with a sense of pride about what I did. And honestly, like I feel like I'm just carrying some of that work out because the organizations that I worked for, I named a few of them, but those values that I had then, like, I intentionally chose to work for those organizations because they aligned with my values. And so now I just feel like I get to take those values, and, just kind of recreate them in a different form now that I'm a legislator.
Was there something that prompted you to enter the race, to switch from lobbying and being on the campaign side to being a candidate yourself?
Yeah. I thought I had written it off, quite frankly. Like I was in a place where I was, still passing legislation. I was still helping other women get elected. So I felt really good about that. And I had a job that paid. Let's get real. Like I had a job that paid. Um, and so I really thought I had written off running for office. And I am a real believer in the universe sending signs. Um, and so the year I decided to run was actually the year that I was leading the coalition to pass paid family and medical leave. Um, and we lost the vote that year in the House by one vote. And I remember thinking, like, we knew it was going to be a close vote. Undoubtedly, the vote count had us at one, right? And so um, but what was interesting to me is like after the vote happened, there are all these advocates who are up in the gallery and they all come toward me and they were like, well, what do we do now? And I was just like lost for words. I didn't know what to say. I was like, I don't know. I just said, I don't know. And so I had to go like collect myself. And um, so I ended up going downstairs into the then majority leader's office, who was my predecessor, Representative and Leader Gail Chasey. And I just remember going downstairs and everybody had this like awful feeling about what had just happened. And I sat on her couch and, it was, Representative Chasey told me she was about 20 minutes out from telling her colleagues that she was not going to return. And that is pretty much how it happened. I thought, okay, like the universe is sending you a sign. Like the one thing I couldn't do was talk to my now colleagues as colleagues and earn their trust about what I was saying and how important different aspects were the bill were. And so I thought, okay, like maybe this is a sign, like, it's Representative Chasey's seat now. She's announcing her retirement. I live in the district. This big thing had just happened where we lost by one vote. And I thought, okay, like I think I can do this. And it was honestly kind of a spur of the moment decision. But I knew what it took, right? I wasn't walking in blind. I knew exactly what it took to run a campaign, to be in office, to do the job, the sacrifices you make with your family, with your finances. So I was informed, but the decision to run was not planned out. And I joke about this with folks because a lot of folks think that I like plan to run. And I was like, oh no, if I planned to run, trust me, like I would have been in a much better financial position to do so. And um, so anyway, that's how it happened, and that's how I'm here. And I feel like the universe just helped align my path here.
Has it been what you expected, being a lawmaker now, I guess, 2 sessions in?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, like I said, I had kind of already done this, give or take. I wasn't taking votes or anything like that, but um I feel like to a certain extent, yeah. And it really shaped how I want to be a legislator. Because I think everyone has a different style. So everyone has a different style. Some people carry a lot of bills, some people carry a little bit of bills, some people are in leadership, so they kind of leave bills to other folks. And so for me, I was like, okay, I can be really intentional about what I do. Because for me, it's like not having a hand in every single thing, but it's like being really good at a handful of things is like really where I want to be. So if I carry a bill, I dig in really deep. Um, because I want to know everything about it. I was one of the advocates. I was one of the experts who sometimes testified beside legislators. But I knew that the legislator I wanted to be was an expert on my bill. And so I'm really proud of the way I carry my bills, and I entered the legislature as a freshman.
Great. Well, I'd love to talk about some of that legislation, but let's take a quick commercial break and be back in just a moment.
Have you seen what's happening in Doña Ana County? Project Jupiter's a better kind of data center. Instead of traditional generators, it uses cleaner fuel cells to protect our air and preserve water without impacting energy costs for local residents. Project Jupiter even provides $50 million to improve Doña Ana County's water system. It's a data center, done right. Learn more at projectjupitertogether.com.
Paid for by Oracle.
So I'd love to start chatting about the Zorro Ranch Truth Commission, which has gotten a lot of attention, not just in the state, but nationally and internationally. How did you end up on this 4-person panel?
Yeah. Sometimes I ask myself the same thing. um, but really, I feel like it was my work with survivors of sexual assault and my advocacy around issues dealing with sexual assault, specifically in the Capitol. And so, um, I know I told my story about what happened to me in the Capitol. And quite honestly, I had a lot of survivors who were coming to me who were telling me about their experiences. And for me, there's nothing quite like hearing so many women come to you to really make you want to work on these issues. To me, it kind of signaled that I wasn't alone. Um, and so, with that, kind of lights my fire to do something about it. So, all of that to say, I know my colleague Andrea Romero had this idea, and she called me and she was like, "Hey, I have this idea. What do you think?" And I was like, "Absolutely, sign me up. Like, I am so here for it." Um, and I think one of the most beautiful things about the commission itself is that we actually have 4 incredible commissioners who are really dedicated to survivors. And I don't think that that has happened. It's my opinion that we are the only body right now that is working for survivors, because a lot of folks really want to make this a political issue. And I'm really, really proud of the 4 of us because, some folks have come to us trying to make it political, and we have stuck together and just said, absolutely not. Like, this is not about politics. It is not about this election. It's not about any election. This is about survivors, and that's that. And so I've just been really proud of the commissioners for being able to come together, talk about things really honestly, openly, and for us to be able to figure out how we are going to make this a survivor centered approach, and to hold people accountable, to tell the truth about what happened here in the state of New Mexico, but also make sure that those who need to be held accountable are.
When you mention your work around the Capitol and the other women coming forward to you, could you provide a little bit more information for people who may not have heard of everything that was going on a few years ago, even broadly speaking?
Yeah, sexual assault has been happening in the Capitol for a really long time. And not just in the Capitol, like we know that sexual assault is about power. right? And so anywhere there are power differentials, but especially in places like the legislature, where I feel like it's a much heavier um, place of power. You're undoubtedly going to have power struggles, some of which um, result in sexual assault of folks. And so a couple years ago, I came out about what happened to me and my sexual assault at the Capitol. And quite honestly, I wasn't going to say anything about it. I thought, no, Maddie, like, is this going to ruin your reputation? I was an advocate, but I was so new also. I was new to being a lobbyist. Um, and it wasn't until I shared my story and then somebody else shared their story with the same person, and another person shared their story with the same person. And I just thought, holy cow. And I think at the end of it, there were about 10 of us who really spoke out about this. And so, for those folks who are listening, I'm sure we have a lot of politicos who listen to this as well. But that was a really pivotal moment for me to say, okay, like, this is work that I want to do. So I knew entering the legislature that I wanted to work on issues of sexual assault, and not just in the Capitol, but generally.
How do you think that informs your work on the Truth Commission?
Um, it actually, I feel really good about my work on the Truth Commission. And I feel like a lot of the things that I do are maybe behind the scenes are very tiny. But like a good example is our very first Truth Commission meeting. You know, we're in spaces that never think about our center survivors. And for me, it was really important to think about not just talking to the survivors who wanted to speak before, to say, look, here's the room you enter into. You can go there. There was one of the survivors said she didn't really want to talk to press. And I was like, great, we'll make sure that there's somebody there to make sure that, press don't approach you. When they got there, there were snacks, which was great because some of them were traveling in. They had kids, they were hungry. And so there was like more of a safe space. We made sure that we had folks on call who could provide counseling services if needed. Um, there was so it's anything from like little small details like that, like making like I feel like that's kind of my what I hold as a part of the commission, but also like as we enter into conversations about the who's and the what's, right? I think a lot of we're going to have a lot of complicated conversations about what it means for survivors to be groomed, right? And to also participate. What does that mean? And what does it mean for accountability? And so for me, I really hope to bring like a humanistic approach to that as well. Working alongside the Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs is going to be essential for us as well, for us to remain informed about what that means and what grooming looks like, and for us as a commission to think about the ways in which we can structurally change what is happening with sexual assault, not just in our capital and, not just, um, on a smaller scale with what's happening with Epstein, but I think on a much larger structural scale as well. What does it mean to have so many survivors who are here in New Mexico? What laws are still failing them right now? Um, and so that's one example of, I think, what I bring to the commission. Uh, a survivor called, and I was able to connect her with someone for Olympia, which is wonderful. And I think speaks to New Mexico very much so, right? What does it mean to be able to connect um, survivors with resources that are culturally relevant? So, yeah, I think that's part of what I bring to the commission.
What update can you provide listeners about what the commission has accomplished so far?
Yeah. So I'm really glad that you asked this question because there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that I think a lot of people don't really know about. And that I'm really happy to share because we as a commission are talking to each other um, multiple times during the week. And I think that's really part of the beauty of it because um, there's not a lot of trust right now between political parties. I don't know if there ever was, but I think right now in particular. And so I feel like that's really important to keep us together and cohesive. but also talking about some of the roadblocks that we're encountering. We knew that this was going to be hard. We knew that every subpoena we send out, that people may or may not answer. And what does that mean for us? Like, what does that mean for us being able to tell the whole story? Um, but I can also say, like, on the other hand, where there are some entities that are not the easiest to deal with, which I'm sure you can imagine which those are, but others are really trying to comply, and so we have some folks who reached out for extensions. And to me, I think that's a good sign, knowing that we have some entities that are trying to get their documents together in order to make the deadline.
Mm-hmm. So you've sent out these subpoenas. What can people expect to happen next?
Yeah. So I'm when it comes to the report itself, I think one of the things that has been maybe misunderstood about the report on the end of July is that it's going to have some like massive findings. Like, to me, I think the important thing for people to know is that we've been doing this, what, less than 6 months now? The majority of which has been hiring our legal counsel, making sure that we're getting subpoenas out, passing the legislation itself, making sure that we had technology set up that was secure. I think was a really big deal because of how sensitive this information is. Us coordinating with the New Mexico Department of Justice to make sure that we are not messing up any potential criminal investigations has been key as well. And so, one of the things that I like to put into perspective is the fact that, this has been going on for what, 30 some years here in our state. And in just a matter of months, like, we've been able to accomplish so much. And I also like want to acknowledge how frustrating it is because we move at the speed of government, which is a total snail's pace, like, undoubtedly. And it's really frustrating. But I think for me, it's really important to also step back and be able to say, nothing has been done for 30 years. And like for the first time, we're able to say, you know what, like, this is something that needs to be opened, investigated, a story that needs to be told. And so for us to be able to do what I consider so much in a short amount of time comparatively is really, really important.
Can you provide any more detail on the roadblocks you mentioned? Is it the federal entities that you've subpoenaed that are causing more resistance?
I wouldn't even necessarily say like it's federal versus state. I think each of the subpoenas and the um, I guess the heads of each of the entities all act very differently. Um, and so I wouldn't necessarily say it's federal versus state at all. But we knew definitely with the federal subpoenas that one, they take longer to issue themselves, just logistically. But the second piece is that, you know, uh, I believe this information has been sought for so long and has not been released. And so for us, it wasn't going to be a big surprise if they did not respond. But for us, it's also important to be able to tell the story about what happened in New Mexico. And so part of that was subpoenaing, is that a word? Subpoenaing our own entities here in the state, which is something that hadn't been done.
Are you hopeful that these subpoenas will then give you the foundational knowledge to subpoena individuals? Is that something you think will happen this year?
Yeah, I really hope so. So for us, it's like we are learning from some of the, I don't want to say mistakes, but some of the lessons that Congress has learned. So, Congress, we've been in close touch with our Congresswoman Stansberry in particular, who is, of course, on the Oversight Committee. Um, and one of the things that they did was subpoena the people first. And so they kind of went in asking questions that maybe not as pointed as we would like for them to be. And so for us, it's really important to have this foundational understanding, have documents to actually refer to when we are asking questions of the actual people that we are going to subpoena. And I think, um, it's really hard when there is so much media involved because of the fact that everybody wants something quickly and they want a story, right? And there's a lot of clickbait that happens. And so for us, it was about coming together as a commission and saying, what do we actually need? Like, what do we need to be able to ask the right questions to these people? And sure, we could have subpoenaed, names off the bat, because there are a lot of names that are all around us that we all know, have been mentioned, that do deserve questioning. But for us, we needed those documents first to be able to ask better questions and to get better information when we actually talk to folks, like individuals that we subpoena.
And are you beginning to get those documents and read through, get that foundational knowledge, or has that not happened yet?
Yeah, there were some entities who, I think probably knew that they were going to be subpoenaed or asked for documents. And so I do believe they kind of probably started getting stuff together a little bit earlier. But then there are other entities, like I said, that are asking for like small extensions. And I think that's a sign of good faith, that people are actually trying to get documents together instead of just saying, like, oh, here's what we think we have a good time.
Representative, I was curious what you thought about our reporting a few days that Epstein had a private ambulance at Zorro Ranch, possibly a dental office, that his girlfriend was a registered dentist here. What was your reaction to that?
Zero surprises. Honestly, I feel like at this point, I don't think I will be surprised by anything. I think the things that have happened to survivors are so horrific that there's honestly nothing that's off the table. And I think the pitfall of what we saw previously was that people didn't listen to survivors. They thought it was too out of this world to believe. And it is, like, it's too out of this world, but not too out of this world to believe. And so I was not shocked, especially because I had actually been very much like you, Clara, and like dove into the public documents, like, even before we hired our legal counsel, like even before we passed legislation, I was like deep in the weeds. And so for me, like, I started making my own list of things, and there are doctors in there. There are doctors in these files that um, deserve to be asked questions about what the heck they were doing on that ranch, you know? Um, and so it was not a surprise to me at all, especially given the fact that we have survivors, and I would never tell a survivor story that wasn't already public. Um, but we do have public testimony from survivors that they woke up in medical settings here in the state of New Mexico. And so for me, that has always been a critical piece of what we need to look into, because we hear about the crimes of sex trafficking so much, but I actually believe that there were um, other crimes, potentially, probably, that were being committed here in the state, that could involve medical crimes. Um, and I think those are really important to investigate.
That's interesting. I think, as someone who reports on this a lot, I have heard some people say that a lot of the people responsible are dead, that, at this point, it's unlikely to get justice for survivors, that kind of thing. Why do you think that this is a good use of time and resources and that sustained attention is important?
Yeah, I mean, for several reasons. To me, accountability isn't necessarily just locking one person up. And I think that's what a lot of people see as accountability. It is one form of accountability for sure. And I think when people think of what happened with sex trafficking and Epstein, they think of just Epstein or Ghislaine, right? They don't think of this massive network of people who are still alive, who can face accountability and repercussions. I think that is one layer, right? Is personal accountability and repercussions. But the next layer to that onion is, how did we as a state enable things like this to happen? And so we are talking about systematic issues, right? We're talking about potential laws that we could change to make sure this never happens again. Um, we can talk about people looking the other way, right, in state government. And I think, like, the third layer that people don't necessarily think about, but it is really important for a truth commission. Like, if you've seen other truth commissions, the way that they take shape is always very different. We heard from a scholar very early on when we were talking about are we going to do this? How are we going to do it? How are we going to set it up? We heard from a scholar who actually threw out several things. She was like, this one Truth Commission actually took the story of what happened and they made sure that that story was taught in the history class. Right. And I think these are things that a lot of people don't think of when we're thinking about not just systematic change, but culture change. Right. We also had an entire community who knew that there was something happening and they didn't know what, but a lot of people just looked the other way. And is that a crime? It- Depending, right? But for most people, probably not, right? They thought something was happening. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to look into. So for me, like the larger piece of the onion as well to peel back is what do we do as community members to make sure that sexual assaults, sex trafficking, et cetera, medical crimes, right, are not happening in this state? And what does it mean to look the other way? What does it mean to have individual responsibility as a community member to make sure that all of our people are safe? And so I think that there are multiple forms of accountability, and the reason why this Truth Commission is so important.
I should ask, you mentioned you think there may have been other crimes aside from sex trafficking, including medical crimes. Are there other categories of crimes that you're looking into or curious about?
Yeah, absolutely. The financial crimes are a huge piece. I know that, we are functioning not off of taxpayer dollars. We are actually functioning off of the Deutsche Bank settlement that the state received. And so, um, we know that there were crimes that were committed. There were wrongs that were done here financially. I think, as you look into the documents, it's very clear that there were many business entities that were set up to shuffle around money, which in turn shuffled around people, right? Which led to the sex trafficking piece. There were banks that looked the other way. I'm sure you've seen some of those documents. It's like red flags all over these financial reports, right? Where it's like, hey, your client has all these red flags on their record. Like you would think somebody would have done something, but instead, systematically, people did not. And so, and when I say people, I mean also entities, right? Whole corporations, businesses, banks, all covered to protect predators in this network.
So you have a final report deadline of the end of the year. Do you think that's enough time?
I don't think we've ever thought it was enough time. Like, I think even the investigations that have sort of happened, right? Or lack thereof, I don't know, have taken years. And so for us, like the original deadline was set because we didn't know if we were going to be a part of this commission, if we all got unelected. And so unfortunately, that's like a reality that we have to deal with is like running every 2 years. And so we were able to set something and get our resolution passed for a year. But to me, it's never been enough time. And I believe my fellow commissioners would agree that it's absolutely not enough time. But to me, like we have to report to the people what is happening, even if it means, our midterm report is, hey, here are the people we subpoenaed, here are the people who actually responded, here are the people, like, what is the current status of what's happening right now in a more robust way. I actually believe our end of year report is probably going to be the same. It's going to be, here is, what we found out so far. Here are people we've interviewed. This is the current status of the amount of truth that we have right now. And so to me, like, um, we are we are not a prosecutorial body, but we can make laws. And so what I believe should be happening is um, at the end of this year when we issue the final report, I hope that it is extended. I hope that we're able to extend it. Um, Not the report deadline, but I hope we're able to extend the commission and the commission's work this legislative session. And I also hope that we as a commission come with at least a preliminary set of legislation to say, hey, as the Truth Commission, here are some of the gaps that we're finding. Um, this is what we need to address. And so one of those is, of course, the civil statute of limitations for childhood sexual assault, which was actually legislation that I had carried prior to being on the commission. But quite honestly, people have been carrying for 10 years. And so that legislation is something that has been fought for frequently. And it's something that I hope we can bring as a commission as well.
What would extending the commission look like? Maybe 1 or 2 more years?
I don't know. Honestly, I think it depends on what we're able to find, how quickly we're able to find it. And I also think that it depends on what my fellow commissioners think as well. Like, is this substantial? We believe it is a good use of the funds that were set up to very deliberately stop sex trafficking. And so, stopping sex trafficking means accountability for communities, it means accountability for systems and legislation. Um, and so for us, it's a good use of the funds that were very specifically for ending sex trafficking in the state.
Yeah, it's a huge project, and I imagine it's taking up a lot of your time at this point. Is it close to full time that you're working on the commission?
It's pretty wild. I would say our chair does the most work. She's incredible. Like, I all the praise to Chair Andrea Romero, because she has a big burden when it comes to this commission. But we as commissioners ourselves are consistently working on this. Anywhere from reporters reaching out from across the world, but also everyday people reaching out saying, "Hey, I have a tip. Hey, can you connect me to your legal counsel? Hey, I'm a survivor." Right? Our personal phones ring and we pick up, and we now have phones for the commission itself. But you never know what random number is calling you, and it's like, is this a reporter today? Is it a survivor? Right? And so you kind of have to be ready for anything at any moment. So it's a lot of just being on our toes. But the work is good. Like, it's really good work, and it's work that really needs to be done. And so I'm happy to answer my phone. Like, I'm happy to be on this commission. I'm happy to address this. And honestly, like, one of the most beautiful things for me anyway has been being able to form a relationship with the survivors themselves. Like, that is huge. It's huge for me because I feel like a lot of times survivor stories are used as clickbait, and they kind of get left alone. Like, nobody checks on them after, nobody makes sure that they're okay, like when they don't have a meeting scheduled or coming up. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's that like hard work, but heart work that goes into this as well.
Can I ask how many survivors roughly you've heard from on the commission?
It's hard to quantify because some have reached out directly to me, some have reached out to the chair, some have reached out to Rep. Reeb, Rep. Hall, some have reached out straight to our legal counsel. And so it's a little bit hard to quantify. I also wouldn't want to put a number on that because I'm sure there will be more survivors that come forward as well.
Great. Well, Representative, do you have any parting words, maybe for listeners who want to know how they can help support the work of the commission?
Keep helping us look through those documents. Like, to me, this is a public project. And like, Clara, your coverage on this has been phenomenal. Like,
Thank you.
we also really rely on reporters who are going through this as well, just because there's so many documents. Like, there's so many things to uncover. It's such a massive amount of information. And so for us, it's really helpful to be able to like read something that maybe we hadn't seen, and this way we can make sure that we're looking into it as well. So I do urge the public to keep looking into the files right alongside us, because if there's anything that needs further investigating, we know a lot of files are not released, and we know a lot of files, maybe from New Mexico, were never necessarily shared. And so, I think it's kind of it's all on the table for us I think as a collective community to figure out what were missteps, how do we address this as a community? And part of that means you can help by helping us look through files. I think the last thing I just want to say is really uplift the Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs, because, both back in the day, I would say all the way up to now, they have been helping and intaking these survivors. Um, Sexual abuse by Epstein, but also just sexual assault, sexual abuse here in our state. And so I just want to let anyone who's a survivor know that there is a helpline, NMSA help, so New Mexico Sexual Assault helpline, that is available for anybody who is a survivor who maybe needs some support right now. It's really hard to listen to the news sometimes and maybe get re-triggered. And so just know that they are there for you and they're incredible local support.
Great. Well, thank you to our listeners for joining this episode of Around the Roundhouse. You can read our latest stories at sfnewmexican.com and find the podcast each week by subscribing through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to Representative Anaya for joining us. It's always a pleasure chatting.
Have you seen what's happening in Doña Ana County? Project Jupiter's a better kind of data center. Instead of traditional generators, it uses cleaner fuel cells to protect our air and preserve water without impacting energy costs for local residents. Project Jupiter even provides $50 million to improve Doña Ana County's water system. It's a data center, done right. Learn more at projectjupitertogether.com.
Paid for by Oracle.